All right. Well, as you all obviously see, we have a star-studded lineup today. We're delighted to have the Ambassador of Mexico, Jerónimo Gutierrez, Ambassador to Washington. He joined us here today, joined us as ambassador. He's actually joined us multiple times before at the same conference. As the head of the North American Development Bank, he's come here at least 2 times previously as we've had this conference, so he's sort of a staple, a mainstay, but we're delighted to have you here in your new role. You've been a longtime friend of the Mexico Institute, a longtime friend of the border region, a longtime friend of all these people that represent communities throughout the border region. And so thank you for your service to communities on both sides of the U.S. Mexico border. It's really impressive and really important. When times are tough, when times are tricky in a relationship, a country sends its best. And that's when they sent you to represent Mexico here in Washington. We feel real honored to have you here in Washington and here with us at the Mexico Institute today. I'll just read you all a little bit about Ambassador's bio so that you have a sense of the things that he's done and what brought him to this position, what qualified him so well for this position that he has today, and then I'll pass it over to the ambassador because I know that's who you all want to hear from. Ambassador Jerónimo Gutierrez was named Mexican Ambassador to the United States in January 2017. He previously served as Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the North American Development Bank. Ambassador Gutierrez has extensive professional experience and expertise in U.S.-Mexico relations and border affairs, having served as the Undersecretary for North America at the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Relations from 2003 to 2006. Additionally, he was Undersecretary for Latin America and the Caribbean, and more recently served as Undersecretary of Government, of Gobernación in the Mexican Ministry of Government. In the area of finance, he was the head advisor in the Mexican Ministry of Finance and Public Credit between 1992 and 94, an advisor for the Mexican Development Bank, Banco de Obras. Previously, his professional track record is incredible and extends far back on issues related to Mexico, the U.S.-Mexico relationship, on the economic side, on the security side, on issues of migration, on all the issues that matter to us today. Thanks very much for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Well, good morning to all of you. Thank you very much, Chris, for that very, very kind introduction. I really appreciate it. Let me also thank the Mexico Institute at the Woodrow Wilson for inviting me again to this important conference. Thank you very much, Duncan. It's really a pleasure to be here. First, allow me to express on behalf of everybody and the embassy and the Mexican government and myself the solidarity with Representative Scalisi and all that were involved in these morning incidents. Our prayers are with them and their families. It's a pleasure to be here, as Chris was saying. I have been here, I think, 3 or 4 times at the conference. And I would like to start commending the Institute for actually keeping this going. To my knowledge, probably this is the only forum that has consistently provided a space to reflect upon the U.S.-Mexico border in general. And that is always useful. And that's really you don't know how important it is for the governments to be able to have a forum like this. So I appreciate it, and I hope that you continue it and strengthen it and whatever we can do to support it. My central message here is one, which is basically the idea that border management, which is what I'm about to speak on, it's really, and border modernization is really a way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And it basically allows us to boost and improve trade, but also to address security. Since 9/11, we have had both sides a learning curve, a very complex learning curve to get to that point. Security, it's important, obviously, for both countries, for the United States, for Mexico. And I'm sure, as I was listening to part of last panels, obviously our trade relation, our economic relations is extremely important. The border, it's important for many reasons. Its vitality, the economic opportunity, all the different challenges that it have. But it's also relevant because we don't often realize enough that the border serves the bilateral relation as a whole is often seen through the lenses of what happens at the border. And what happens at the U.S. Mexico border, it's also frequently informing the world about the U.S. Mexico relationship. That is what people focuses the most. So it's important in itself. As all border communities, the governor, obviously, Governor Ducey knows, and a lot of the different stakeholders that are here. But it's also important because it reflects on the broader bilateral relationship. Throughout the day, you're going to hear from a lot of experts on different areas. And in that regard, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I do want to share with you what I think are four very important topics or issues regarding border management. The first one is institutionalization. Over the last 2 decades, both sides have been trying, and largely successful in my view, to institutionalize our border management. From addressing water issues, to security, consular contacts. And if you look, we have been creating different rules or institutional spaces where we can review, where we can jointly address all of the challenges. The Binational Bridges and Border Crossing Group, for example, was established in 1993, and since then, it has been a central component to try to address point of entry infrastructure. We have also the 21st Century Border Management Initiative, which has, really, it's intended to go precisely to the point of providing security while also encouraging trade. And if you look down the list, obviously you have the Border Environmental Cooperation Commission, the North American Development Bank, something in health. But the central point, my first thought with you is we need to keep institutionalizing border management and improving. That provides institutional memory as there are changes in administration. It provides knowledge about what has worked and what has not worked in border management. And it also allows to do benchmarking throughout the border. What is working? So the central point is, let's keep, my first point is, we have successfully over the years institutionalized our border management, and we should continue to do so. That's number one. The second one has to do with, I will basically refer to as the tendency to pre-clear and pre-vet cargo and people is the right way to go, because over the border, as many of you know, is so dynamic and so much going on that to the extent that we can take the challenges or the problems is that we have a border away from the border, we will be doing a lot of benefit. Over the years, as you know, both governments have worked in pre-clearing cargo through different programs from which you're going to hear. Jose, and my understanding is Commissioner McLean will be later, so I'm not going to get into that because they will do a far better job than me in going into detail. But just some of the latest examples include the implementation in Laredo, Texas airport in October of 2015 that allows pre-clear cargo from the United States go to any airport in Mexico. We have the Mesa de Otay, which was inaugurated in January 2016, that provides also pre-clearance for agricultural products at this stage going into the United States. And soon we have been working, and probably the San Jerónimo Santa Teresa in Industrial Park, which is very different and interested because it involves pre-clearance of a single, within the installations of a single very big firm. But that tendency should continue. On the person side, you also have all the different programs, whether it's global entry and Sentry lanes. People, if you don't have a Sentry lane, for example, people at the border, you will be, it will be a huge problem for you. It's like having a wallet. It's something that everybody tries to do at the border. So, and in the end, that is what will allow us to better concentrate resources in addressing the shared security concerns. If you are able to pre-clear the vast majority of the flows that go through the border, then the resources that both countries are spending nowadays to secure our shared border are going to be much better used in whatever real threats or risks we have. So that tendency, the second point is we should continue with the tendency of pre-clearing and pre-vetting both cargo and people, and that will help our economic relation and will certainly improve our security on both sides. The third point that I want to stress, and is related to this issue about institutionalization, is, and maybe that's, in a sense, is an autocritic. We have a lot of memoranda on the border, on many different MOUs on 100 of things on the border, including security and trade. What I'm not sure that we really have are shared assessments of many things. No? And I think we should work on those. Let me just give you an example of what I mean. A security strategy is really about identifying risks, assigning them a probability that they will occur, and then pooling and using whatever resources you have available to minimize those risks. That's a security strategy. Clearly, the type of challenges that on security that the United States has are not exactly the same as Mexico has. But there's a fairly big common denominator on the security threats that we both have. So what we should try to do is, on a comprehensive and on a regular basis, work on shared assessments on the different challenges that we face at the border. Security, there has never been a report that says share assessments on the security challenges at the U.S.-Mexico border, which is sanctioned by both sides. We do have a lot of information, exchange intelligence, and maybe not everything that would be in that assessment could be public, most likely. But the important thing is that they're comprehensive and that we repeat them with certain frequency. That doesn't mean that those assessments are legally binding, because I can see why, from the government side, we will be skeptical, or the U.S. will be skeptical about saying, well, I'm going to do an assessment that becomes in some way or fashion legally binding. No, that's not the point. We need to have the shared assessments. It's a blueprint, and we should have those on energy, on infrastructure, on water, on health at the border. And they should provide just a blueprint that allows the work of local governments, federal governments, state governments, and stakeholders to be essentially at the same page on all these reasons. I think that's something that we do it in some way through the different mechanisms that I have referred to, but not in a way that it's systematic. And I'll give you one example. One of the, share assessments that we do have is the master border plans on points of entry infrastructure. They're a very useful exercise. They involve both federal and local authorities and stakeholders, obviously the private sector. But they're not sufficient because, A, they don't have the same methodology throughout the border. They're not necessarily done on a regular basis. And on the Mexican side, being honest, they were not, the level of involvement, it's different on the Mexican side as on the U.S. side. If we're going to do those, for example, assessments, these regional master plans, there should be a disciplined effort to make them every 2 years, every 3 years, every 4 years, every 5 years, whatever it's appropriate, with a shared and understood methodology that provides a blueprint. And we should be able to do those for everything that we have at the border. So that's my third point, shared assessments. And the final one, and I don't know exactly how to call it, but it would be like different levels of coordination or integration, which is the following. If you look at the border, we have in the neighborhood of, I think, 16 binational metropolitan areas. Brownsville, Matamoros, McAllen, Reynosa, Los Nogales, all the way to Baja California and San Diego. Obviously, El Paso, Juarez. There's a big number of again, binational metropolitan areas. And over the years, those areas have a very rich experience in trying to create some form of coordinating mechanism. Good examples are the borderplex between Juarez and El Paso.
Lydia from
Right, Lydia, I hadn't seen you. I know, and I've been involved that, for example, Matamoros and Brownsville have also made efforts to try to have some form of coordinating mechanism. The fact that San Diego and Tijuana now every year come together to lobby Washington and Mexico City is quite interesting if you think about it. And it's a joint binational delegation from Tijuana, from the private sector, the public sector of Tijuana, and San Diego that come to DC or go to Mexico City and look at their agenda. And Paola is here, and I think you've led several of them. Those mechanisms, from the federal government perspective, the first instinct is to scare us a bit. No? What are they doing? They're not the appropriate level of government to do this. What are they trying to accomplish? That's what usually happens. My point is we should learn more about these experiences. It's not evident, at least to me, first of all, what are their limits? What are they really useful for? Are they working? And what are the best practices, right? And then try to determine whether those mechanisms, and the next step would be if there is specific things that they can do together, and I'm not talking, I emphasize, about a binational governmental authority. That's not the case. But even if it's simply a well-established coordinating and planning mechanism, we should probably think about creating some mechanisms or a framework in which they can have a trust on either side, like a development authority on the U.S. side, a development authority on the Mexican side, with board members on both sides crossing to the other one, right? And then having some form of trust mechanism that will allow to put money and establish that regularly. And I think, and I do want to put a bit of the institute on the spot, but we need to learn more about that. What is happening on those? I think the day before yesterday, there was a one created. What does is the Dos Laredo Strategic Council, and it's a new one, between Laredo and Nuevo Laredo, which is intended to do these types of things: strategic planning, joint promotion, look at chains of value throughout both sides, address joint infrastructure, and it was just recently rated, another one. Yeah. And I think that there's valuable experiences in there if those involved, have the appropriate level of involvement of the federal government, because the federal government cannot lose track of, we have a responsibility to look at the border comprehensively, but we should also look at what the local stakeholders really see as problems and as opportunities. Frequently, the people at the border over the years have complained that Washington and Mexico City neglects the border, and I don't know, Governor, if that's the case, but in recent years there have been more involvement from the federal government. So again, let me just repeat, institutionalization. Let's keep the tendency of pre-clearing and pre-vetting. We need to learn more about this local coordination or integration experiences, and then let's work on shared assessments that are non-binding legally, if you like, but that do provide a bilateral blueprint, not for the immediate year, but maybe a little longer term, 3 to 5 years. I will stop there, and we'll be happy to listen to your comments and questions.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. you presented an outstanding vision of cooperation and what we can accomplish with it. I mean, I think along the way, the huge benefit of everything that you talked about is that it involves bringing Mexicans and Americans together to do these processes, to implement these projects together, which in and of itself is a confidence building measure, is a communication building measure, and provides the framework, the trust that's needed to implement the very things that you're talking about. I know you have to go to Florida to the conference that Mexico is co-hosting with the United States on Central America, with Central American countries as well. But if you do have time for just one question, we'd love to take one. Okay, great. We could take one question right here.
Thank you, Ambassador. My name is Amina Sayed. I'm a reporter with Bloomberg BNA. And I would like to ask you, the white elephant in the room is the border wall proposal, and how that would affect all of these issues that you're talking about, having shared assessments, how that would affect, say, shared water resources, major problems that could occur if this wall were to go through.
In some, we have agreed to disagree. We are in the midst of a learning curve, the new administration here and the Mexican government, and with that specific regard, we have agreed to disagree, and that's pretty much where we are.
Thank you. We're going to take one more question from the back there.
Yes, my name is Luke Wilson. I'm with the Center for Water Security and Cooperation. I wondered, you talked about shared agreements and efforts that could be done to bring water into to bring some of these conversations across the border. Could you speak more about water, particularly as it's relevant to trade and work that could be done in that area?
Sure. One of the things that I have said publicly before in a different life iteration was that I thought that water was going to be a central issue in the future in the U.S. Mexico relation, and specifically in the border, as it's happening in other places of the world. It wasn't going to be security, because that will get tackled, and it will all be present. And whenever we reach a way to better management the migration phenomenon, which my hope is that would be soon, but regardless, demographics will take care of that at some point in time. But water, it's a central challenge for U.S. and Mexico on the border. 3 or 4 quick things would be, thankfully we have institutionalized that issue specifically. We do have an agreement that both sides see as largely being a fair and successful treaty, in fact. The second thing is that we have created a binational, talking about institutionalization again, a binational institution, which is the IBWC, the International Boundary and Water Commission, that has 2 sections, one on the U.S., one on the Mexican side. And irrespective of what people might think of them, I think they have been doing over more than 60 years a fairly good job in addressing a significant part of the challenges that present managing shared river basin throughout the border. The North American Development Bank, the Environmental Cooperation Commission, now merging, by the way, are another example of, we decided to institutionalize that to address concerns, and it has worked. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it has worked. I think there are other areas in the future, which is energy efficiency, water efficiency. There is going to be obviously a discussion, and there are ongoing discussions about how can we improve water efficiency regarding the Colorado River. The border has on both sides a lot of hydric stress. I think that's an area, 3 areas in the future that we should put attention is those discussions on the Colorado River, water efficiency throughout the whole border region on both sides, energy efficiency in water management. We spend a lot of electricity both sides. And then finally, we don't have, and that's missing, a somewhat better mechanism to address underwater groundwater resources. But the experience of the last year shows that it has worked to have these types of institutions, and that we're in a better position now, thanks to the fact that we have those mechanisms that if we did not have them.
And just so you know, Luke and I are actually trying to work on this groundwater issue a bit to try to understand some of the
Then you
challenges
know more about
and
me
what we
than-
need to do as two countries to co-manage that. Ambassador, thank you so much for taking the time
My
to be with
pleasure.
us today. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I thought that was a good message.
So I'm going to invite to the stage our next panelist. Ambassador Wayne is going to moderate this next panel.